Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. Landlords in Ontario often find themselves holding the short end of the stick. Tenants, on the other hand, seem to have several sticks in their arsenal, and they are all long and imposing. While some of their sticks are entirely of their own whimsy and fabrication, these are generally harmless, the most powerful and destructive ones are delicate and strong, hand-carved gifts bestowed from the most benevolent bureaucrats the country has ever seen. Each stick possesses a unique power that when wielded makes the tenant not invisible, but yet untouchable, completely beyond the grasp of laws, money, restitution, fairness, and even common sense. But recently, a new stick has been wrought, forged in wisdom, common sense, and ancient LTB lore of old. This time, the stick has been given not to tenants, most of whom cannot even carry all the sticks they already have, but instead to landlords, those miserable, well-off brutes who take on risk, responsibility, and burden to provide a home for the other. This rare stick deems possessor power, force to ensure faster filing for non-payment of rent, and a few other side benefits. Today, we are talking with Kelly Hawks, a paralegal focusing on landlord, tenant, and small claims court matters. We talk landlording in Ontario, the new Bill 60, what is a sheriff, and more. Before we jump in, quick reminder, stewardship isn't optional. You're doing it well or poorly, whether you like it or not. And when it comes to stewarding your real estate, there are many things to consider. Real estate touches all of our lives in one way or another, and it can be one of the biggest levers God gives us for stewardship. We've thought about this for several years now, and we've just put together a fun quiz to help you find out if you're stewarding your real estate and where you might be able to make improvements. It takes 2 minutes, it's eye-opening, and it can help you on your journey to being a better steward of all that you've been blessed with. Hit the link in the show notes, take the quiz, and see if you're stewarding your real estate or squandering it. To get in touch with the show, visit twostewards.ca. Remember, this show is not financial advice, but is valuable for listening amusement purposes. And now, Kelly Hawks.
Welcome, everybody, back to the Two Stewards Show. And today we've got a guest. We've got Kelly Hawks, who is a paralegal. Thanks for coming on the show, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so she is well known in the Rockstar community, with which both Brent and I are members, and comes very highly recommended. So we thought it's high time to get her on the show and just have a look at sort of the I guess the landscape of landlord-tenant relations, and maybe get some helpful tips. And Bill C-60 just came out, so we want to talk about that a little bit. But you work mostly you serve mostly Ontario, Kelly?
Yeah, I do have clients all over Ontario, but I'm strictly to this province. So
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Side note, Mark, like if you have to know Kelly, it's not necessarily a good thing. So we're glad to have her on, but it's usually in the situations where you're in a pickle with a tenant that you need to reach out to a paralegal. So yeah, I really appreciate your time coming on.
Yeah, no problem. But if you are in a pickle, you do want to know someone like me.
Yes, that is true. And on a personal note, like you've helped me out of a few situations. A few people I know as well, and yeah, we really appreciate it. So that's good. Maybe we can get into some stories, but
well, you could, but I can't because
you can't.
Yeah, that pesky client confidentiality thing. But you can talk about it, and I can not.
I don't even know if I want to get into it. Like, it's an emotional thing, right? When you're a landlord and you have a unit that you love so much, or a house, and then you're like, oh man, this tenant's just not doing what they should do, or they're not paying the rent, or they're damaging something. It's just like, oh. And then, emotions can kind of get the better of you sometimes. So,
and it's interesting that you say it's emotional, because it is so true. Like, I think that part of, a lot of feedback that I get from my clients that sort of are more individual landlords is, they're thanking me for the support through the whole thing, because it's not just the legal aspect of it. It affects their daily lives, right? In some circumstances, some of the easier ones, not as much of a big deal. But there is an emotional and personal component to it for individual landlords, for sure, 100%.
So you got to be a bit of a counselor as well.
I mean, I think the biggest part that causes fear and anxiety for people about dealing with this kind of situation is that they don't know what their rights are. Like, they have a lot of rights. Landlords have lots of rights. They just, which is why I always do those classes with Rockstar to try to make sure that everybody understands what their rights are. And there is an answer for every problem. You know, and it's just a matter of time and figuring out the right road to take to get to the resolution.
I think you're totally right, because one thing I learned recently about fear is that when something's vague, you know, it's easy to be afraid of it. But if you make it specific and really define what it is exactly that you're afraid of, like get specific, like, okay, I'm afraid that my tenant won't pay rent for so many months. Okay. And then you can probably jump into what you're saying. What are your rights? And specifically define, okay, if that situation ever came up, this is what my options are. And then you have, you know, a phone number to call if things go sideways and you don't want to take that upon yourself.
Exactly.
Call Kelly.
Yeah, so I think a lot of our listeners, like some of them are landlords, and then I think we've got a number that are aspiring landlords. So especially young folks getting into their first property, and then you know, with the price of everything, they got to rent out part of it, which is fine. But yeah, it's that fear of the unknown, right? You hear so many horror stories about having long-term tenants. So, you know, I mentioned earlier we have a small property management company, but we also we specialize in short and midterm rentals, and that kind of allays some of those fears. Now, the short-term rentals in Ontario have kind of been choked out due to just due to regulation, right? So basically, in most jurisdictions, it's only owner occupiers that can rent out, which for a young person in their first home is like, that's perfect. So we you know, if we're talking to anybody, we kind of steer them that way first. Do you have any experience in either short or midterm rental dealings at all?
Yeah, like consulting with people who are interested in doing that, yes, but really now it's a matter of just understanding what it is they're looking to do and trying to apply it to the regulations and guidelines that are out there. So a lot of times it's the answers are right there. This is what you're allowed to do. This is what you're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you mentioned about that your audience is a lot of you know, existing landlords, but also aspiring landlords, and that there's so many horror stories. I mean, I just want to make a comment about that, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Of course, nobody wants to write the stories about, oh, my tenancy is going well, I have wonderful tenants with no problem. No one writes about that. But when you look at the stats, like, I think there's almost 2.5 million renters in Ontario. That's a lot of tenants, right? So there's a lot of landlords who they might see these horror stories in the news, and those are the ones that are the you know, headline grabbers and all that. But when I see those extreme situations, from my perspective, the first thing I look at is that's an absent landlord. There's no way that happens overnight or within 1 month. Right. And being an absent landlord comes with a lot of problems. And that's what obviously I encourage new and aspiring landlords and also existing landlords to take into consideration, because you can't obviously monitor with a microscope. But if you're doing 2 inspections a year, you're catching stuff before it gets to those horrific situations that we see on all the Facebook groups and on the news.
Yeah, that's so true, because I'll see, you know, I'm in a bunch of those groups as well, right? And then you see, like, just showed up to the place, it's completely trashed, and there's, you know, there's 10-foot tall trees growing here through the couch that's on the porch, right? And like, well, hold on. The same thing, like, that didn't happen overnight. Where were you? Like, yeah, that sucks. And the only reason they're there is because the tenant stopped paying rent. If they didn't, then, and you know, so doing property management. We aim for 4 visits a year to properties, and if you end up at 3, that's fine.
Yep.
But like, who's changing your furnace filters? Who's cleaning out your vents and all that stuff, right? Like all the maintenance that needs to be done that is going to cost you money you can't rely on the tenants to do it. So, okay, I want to talk about Bill C-60, but before we do that, like what would you say to somebody who's starting to rent a place out? Like, how do they set themselves up for success? So I think you alluded to one of them is like, don't be an absent landlord. Make sure you're visiting at least a couple times a year. What else? Even right from the beginning, from the screening and leases and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think like so there's several different components, and everyone has to understand that you could do, like, for example, when you talk about screening, right? You could do the best and most investigative screening that you think is gonna 100% protect you from problems. It's not the case, because in this line of business, life happens to people. So what I mean by that is, yes, screening is 100% crucial to do. So that's one of the components, right? You want to make sure you understand at least who is going to be taking possession of your property. And when I say, you would be surprised. People say, yeah, I screened, I made them fill out this sheet, and I saw that they have that job on LinkedIn. That's it. That's all they're doing. What? Like, in my line of business, they might have a similar name to someone who's a CEO of some company, like, for example, a very common name. And so they know that the search is going to be this, and I'm going to pop up as CEO of whatever company, and I make $120,000 a year. And then when you actually meet your tenants, some people don't even meet their tenants because they own properties like 4 hours away, and they've let someone else take responsibility for placing the tenant. And they see the tenant, and it's like, that's not who this person is. Like, so screening, it really isn't a detached process. You have to do your homework, right? And it never 100% protects you, but it does reduce the likelihood of like huge issues happening. But when I said that, let's say you've got somebody, you approve them for screening, and yeah, they're employed by a school board, and it's like, people look like great people. Life situations happen, right? They might lose their job. They become ill, and they can't afford to meet their monthly rent obligations and things like that. Those are things that are outside anybody's control. But certainly just getting them to fill out a document that says they work somewhere and this is how much they make. Gone are the days where, you're taking that on, face value. You do have to do you're searching, and you're asking them for a credit report and things like that.
Yeah. Do you have any, any favorite, and like, I know this isn't your purview. You're dealing with the problems, like, when they happen, like afterwards. But I always find the best people to talk to about setting something up are the people who have to deal with the problem. So if you want to know, like, what furnace you should get, well, you got to talk to a guy who services furnaces, because he knows, like, these are the problems I face all the time. So avoid that brand or avoid that setup. So that's why I'm peppering you with these questions, because
no, you're 100% on the money with that. Like, that's why part of the classes I teach are like, in hindsight, if this problem happens, you should have this to rely on, right? And I think that's what you're focusing on right now. Well, absolutely. Some people don't even ask for valid photo ID.
Wow.
Right? Like, you're not even verifying. You're talking over the phone. You're my camera's not working. I don't even know who you are. Like I think that because if you're gonna look at all those horror stories in the news and you're gonna make yourself scared about being a landlord, then actually start to dig into what you can do to avoid those types of stories. We've already talked about 3, right? Verifying the information that's given when you're screening a tenant, not being an absent landlord, collecting valid photo identification. That can become very helpful if you get into a situation where you're trying to collect on maybe non-payment of rent or damages to your property, because when you're trying to locate someone afterwards, you have to have some kind of verifiable information to start to see if the right people, like a skip tracer or somebody like that, can find this person for you, because once they're gone, they're not required to give you a move to address. They're just so collected in advance. Have their license plate, have the type of vehicle, have like their driver's license, and verify what it is, right? I mean, if you're looking at me and my license says I was born in 2011, that's not me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the numbers are off, but I'm making a joke about some things that actually happen. And then look at it, like, because we get a lot of documents from other parties who are defending themselves against claims, and you can tell by looking at them that they're fraud. Like, it's fraud. They're fraudulent documents, so they look funny. The signature isn't the same as what it looks like on their driver's license. These are all things that you, in hindsight, you wish you had looked at.
I feel like you're just basically telling us not to trust anybody. It's like,
trust but verify. Trust but verify.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Like, yeah.
Well, because our tendency is to just want to trust that what someone says is true, right? Like, otherwise you kind of live in this paranoid state of like, oh, is that guy actually, is his name actually Bob, and
this isn't information to scare people. Brent, I'm sorry if you're getting scared by what I'm saying.
He's easily scared. Don't mind him.
It's to empower people to know, right? Like, and gone are the days where you actually meet somebody. When you meet somebody face to face, you get a sense of whether or not they're being honest with you or not, right? It's, a lot of times transactions are done like not by meeting face to face. They're all done online or through like FaceTime or whatever. And there is a lot of value to actually being in the presence of someone else.
Yeah, right? I mean, we meet all our tenants face to face for sure. Yeah, I understand if you're a landlord and you don't maybe have a property manager, in that remote location, like, a little bit different. And you know what? I mean, through Airbnb, we obviously don't meet all our guests, but they do a decent job screening. So that one's a little bit different.
Yeah, I don't want to make any claims myself, but I feel I've done like hundreds of showings, thousands probably, I don't know, but I feel like if I see a tenant I want, I'm like, I don't even need to screen them. I'll say you're a good tenant, but I don't want to make that claim because you're plugging your ears. See, she's plugging her ears.
No, you know what? I kind of agree with you, Brent, because you always do all the checks afterwards.
We go through the motion.
You meet that person, you're just like, yep, I know they're right. And you do all the checks, and like that, I don't think that has failed us yet. But you need to do hundreds of showings and meet lots of people before 100%.
Yeah, it's like when you hire someone for a job, right? Sure, you look at their resume first and you're like, that might work. That skill set might apply to this position. Let's see if they're gonna like fit with the environment. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. You should never remove that component, that personal component about meeting them.
Yeah, 100%.
But how does the landlord-tenant board actually work? Because I
doesn't.
think we can allay. Well, I think we can allay some fears just by describing the process to our listeners. Just what are the steps, and when do you get involved with the landlord-tenant board? Does it happen with every tenancy?
No, it doesn't happen. That's why I was saying there's something like 2.5 million renters in Ontario. And there's only like, I don't know what the number is for 2025, the number of cases filed, but for 2024, it's nowhere near that. It's like, sure, tens of thousands. But a lot of those things are also resolved. Not all of them end in termination of a tenancy, and they're not the worst case scenario. Sometimes you require the assistance of the process to just compel your tenant to get back on track. Right. And a lot of those things, like not every case I have, and I have thousands, not every one of them ends in termination. Some of them end in accountability and correction of behavior so that the tenancy can be preserved. And that's a very important, component of what the board provides.
So in those cases, are you going to the board, or do you act kind of in a mediation? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Going to the board includes mediation. because mediation services, you can request them once you've started a formal application, right? It's not, you can't contact them and say, I'm having this problem with my tenant. Can you just can I engage your services? It doesn't work that way. It becomes available to parties once you've actually started an application. So serving a formal notice, whatever that notice is, if it's non-payment of rent or a behavioral issue. Then you can request mediation, or at any hearing, not every hearing, but at most hearings, mediation is available for the parties to try to work it out before they actually go before the adjudicator. And the beauty of mediation is that parties have the ability to make the decision about what they're going to agree on themselves, like between each other. When you go before the adjudicator, nobody has that control anymore. It's down to how the adjudicator interprets things and them issuing an order. But before you get to that stage, there's so many opportunities for a tenant to rectify a situation they've gotten themselves into.
So the first thing that you're doing as a landlord is, so if you identify some behavior or thing that, hey, I have to evict this tenant or I have to correct this behavior, I'm going to file a form, and that kind of kickstarts the whole process.
Yeah, I'm going to serve them a form, and it says this is the problem. Like for example, there's several forms that can correct behaviors. It gives them an opportunity to correct the behavior before you're even allowed to go to the next step to file it with the board, like the rent notice, the non-payment of rent notice. It gives them, currently 14 days to pay, but with the new bill 60, it's going to give them only 7 days to pay, which is
all right. We'll talk about that next.
Yeah, that's a juicy one. Or the behavioral one, the N5, it gives them 7 days to remedy their behavior. And then it's considered like a warning, a formal warning. And if they continue the behavior, then you're allowed to proceed to the next step. So
in my experience, so you serve the notice to the tenant, and then you take that and you file it with the board. Okay.
That's because
if you don't do it in time,
without disclosing anything about your type of application, that's because your type of application wasn't addressing behavior by the tenant. It was to achieve something that you were trying to terminate the tenancy for.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I think that's, you made a point that like not everything is about ending a tenancy. And I think in most cases, like you don't want to. Nobody really wants it unless you know this tenant is like a complete nightmare or like they've just disappeared and you got to do the paperwork. But I mean, the goal is always kind of restoration, right? Of that relationship. And because like, yeah, nobody wants to kick somebody out, right? Like it's your people dealing with people. So I think that's just an important point, that a lot of the time it's just corrective behavior. And once they get that notice, that's like, oh, wow. And then they get the notice from the LTB, like, hey, we received this. Like, oh, it's serious. And we found, like, in most cases, that corrects whatever the issue was, whether it's like behavioral or just usually it's rent. Rent missing, right? And, usually you're working with the tenant even before it gets to that point.
I think I've seen like in the past 5 years, obviously the non-payment of rent or the late rent is a persistent thing. This isn't new. This is something that's ongoing. And it's really just simply, it's part and parcel with this line of work, right? Obviously, if someone was able to purchase their own property, if they were late for their mortgage, there would be consequences to that. I think the mentality is for most tenants that they don't connect the two. Like, you have to pay for the mortgage so that we can keep this roof over our heads. And if you don't pay your rent, there is going to be some kind of consequence, even though they're not the owner of the property. And as you said, Mark, like a lot of them are like, whoa, I have 14 days to pay this. I don't like this notice. I don't like how it feels to get this kind of notice. We had some, unexpected things happen, but we're going to get back on track. And oftentimes that is the result of the whole process. But it also sometimes does end in, it's not possible to get on track.
Yeah. So, okay, when should somebody file when they have late or missing rent, in your opinion? Because a lot of people will be like, oh, okay, I got the sob story for this month. Like, let's wait a month. And then, oh, okay, well, next month, let's see. Like, our advice is usually like, file immediately. Like, immediately, and then you can always rescind it. But if you wait 3 months, like, what do you think about that?
So my advice is always to serve the notice immediately. And serving the notice is different than filing the notice. Because like I said, for example, with the N4 right now, you're serving the notice. Let's say they haven't paid the rent on the first, and then it's the second, and you're chasing down the rent. It is one of your rights to receive the rent in full and on time. Right. And if you think about it in the way like how the bank would address it, they're not going to let you go like 1 month without sending you a letter saying you defaulted on your mortgage. It's the same idea, right? Like your responsibility is this component of financial responsibility. If you haven't paid, you're getting my notice. It also establishes that it's not okay. Right. It's not okay to text me and say, sorry, I'm going to be late with the rent. Your response is, the rent is due on the first. I am going to have to issue that notice. And right now, if you're issuing it on the 2nd of the month, that gives them till the 16th to pay. So they're already getting 16 days to pay to void the notice, right? So, excuse me, certainly that's going to change when the changes to the act are going to become effective. It's going to give them 7 days, but that's because what happens is, and I guess from outside, people wouldn't see what we see on the inside. But over the years, we've seen like, let's say, for example, back in 2016, 2017, okay, rent arrears hearings were scheduled within 6 weeks. The amount that was owed at the time of the hearing was actually achievable for the tenant to repay to the landlord. With the delays of scheduling the hearings at the board, the moment of accountability has been delayed so far so that there's an opportunity for that to increase to an amount that is there's no way they're going to be able to pay it back. So the ripple effect of the delays is actually causing more tenants to be displaced.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, 100%.
So when you're delaying that, you're actually contributing to the possibility that they're not going to be able to repay you and get back on track.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you think about it this way too, just because you serve the notice doesn't mean the tenancy is terminated. It says you have 16 days to pay. That means that or 14 days to pay. On the day after, you can file, but it's going to take months for you to get your hearing. So if they pay everything before the hearing, it's discontinued. You can't proceed. And then for those that have chipped away at it, they're in a better position to preserve their tenancy. For those that have ignored the whole process and are getting to a hearing and they now owe $10,000 and they were already struggling to pay their monthly rent, how are they going to pay their monthly rent plus some money back? Right? It starts to take on a completely different, it's not sustainable. It's not viable. So waiting only makes it worse. So my advice is to serve it right away.
Yeah.
So you said 2016 till now, or whatever the timelines have been getting longer. Has that been changing at all the other way, or are we still seeing longer wait times, or where are we at now?
Yeah, we're in a much better position than we were. I mean, I hate talking about 2019, 2020, the pandemic. You know what I mean? I don't even like that word. It's just like, it just created so many things and excuses and stuff that I'm tired of hearing. Some people still use it as an excuse. It's like, sorry.
Yeah.
But not listening, because it's not an excuse anymore. You know what I mean? Sure, it might be a topic of conversation for some landlords that experience some significant losses during that period of time because of the delays. But I don't want to hear that it's a delay. It's a reason for you not being able to pay your rent. That's not true. Sorry. Right.
So, but like hearings are, and I totally agree, but are hearings getting back to where they were like 2016, or we're still like months
We're getting
out?
better. We're about like depending on what they are, right? Like
Right.
rent arrears hearings, I would say what we're seeing is a turnaround of about 3 months,
Are they,
which is
does the
amazing.
board like prioritize based on certain types of hearings? Is that how it works?
There are some that are prioritized, like the illegal actions, applications, the ones that have safety issues, non-payment of rent. Certainly, I would say that from my perspective, they are making a very concentrated effort to, for the bulk of applications, get them scheduled within 3 to 4 months.
Right. Okay. So
So
that's,
way better than it was. Like
it
Brent, we
still
don't even
adds
want
up.
to talk about Brent's
Yeah.
timeline because he was during that period of
Mine
time.
was,
We don't want to say that.
I think it ended up being around 3 years. It was two and a half, something like that.
Oh man.
Yeah. It was not fun.
And no, it wasn't. And frustrating for someone like me too. Like, I mean, I want to see them. I love to see a file like resolve, finish, whether it's like a conditional order and the tenancy is preserved and we're just monitoring it, or it's done and over with so I can move on to the next one and help the next person. When somebody like Brent, who is like a perfect example of falling into those gaps that the board had that they're trying to address, it's not common for that to happen, that significant delay. Yes, there are times where you finally get to your hearing and then it's adjourned for overflow for time. They're even doing better at that.
Well, I can just speak to a little bit. So we did make a mistake to lengthen the timeline, and I think when you talked about hindsight earlier on, like all these things in hindsight, yeah, I would have done that differently. But like for example, serving the notice and then filing it. Okay, well, it's important to serve it right away, but we got to file it as well within the right timeline. So I think some of these timelines got away on us, and that dragged out the process. I had to kind of redo it. That wasn't fun. But what opened my eyes too was when we applied, we had like a technicality with one word on the application, and they were able to throw it out and basically say like, in our case, it was a demolition versus a renovation, and just on the technicality of that word. And I don't know, do you see that a lot where it's like, because to me, I just like look at this and say, okay, this is bureaucracy. Like, do we have to get, like, you understand the spirit of what's going on. Everyone's on the same page. Like, why are we causing another 6 month delay over one word? Is that something that happens a lot, or how do you?
I know
you
that's
see that?
really frustrating for you. And okay, so I'm going to say it as a general, like I'm going to talk about this as generally, not specific to your file. But honestly, I had really hoped that Bill 60 would address that specific issue. What he's talking about, and I'll just say for landlords who have applications to either renovate or repair a unit or demolish a unit, depending on the extent of the repairs to the board in the past, completely gutting a place and completely changing it from like a single family home into a multi-unit property could be considered demolition. But the definition of demolition has sort of changed over a period of time because there's no specific definition of it. Okay. So if the permit doesn't say demolition, the board is taking the position, if the permit doesn't say demolition, or if the four walls of this house are not being knocked down, then it is major renovation. And so even though the unit itself will no longer exist is the argument, right? So demolition means it's no longer in existence. So if you had a single family home and 5 or 6 people are living in it and you're changing it into multi-units that there's only 1 and 2 bedroom units, how can it be the original unit? So it has to be a demolition. That was not defined or made more definitive in the changes with Bill 60. It is still an ongoing issue. The other thing is that by the time the board makes this type of decision, landlords are exhausted and they've found a different, solution to the problem. And so there's no case law like binding case law at the higher courts, because you could have taken, or someone can take that decision to a higher court to get the higher courts to look at it and say, this is ridiculous. You know what I mean? And they can make a binding order on the board that the board has to follow. Right now, at that level, it's at the discretionary power of whoever is making the decision.
Right. Yeah. I call that quibbling. Quibbling over words.
Right? Yeah.
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 Well, you know what I've seen? Sorry, I've seen, I don't know, a number of examples just from like being in the virtual room, and then, you see all the other cases as well, right? Waiting for your turn, where they were actually pretty cool about it, both on the tenant and the landlord side, where somebody had either missed a document or had, written it the wrong way. And they're like, okay, go fix it. And if you get it done in time, by the time I deal with these other people, then we can revisit the thing. And so I don't know if they got better, because, it used to be horror stories I heard, but like you spelt the word "the" wrong. Well, throw it out.
Yeah, what you're talking about, Mark, is section 202 or 212 that speaks to substantial compliance. So in the past, they were very strict, but there's certain errors that can be considered substantially compliant now. Like if you miss the postal code on the notice, they used to throw them out before. They would look for technical issues in order to say that they weren't legally able to issue an order if the foundation notice had problems.
Right.
But there are some notices that have multiple reasons that you would use that notice. And if you've selected one of the reasons, but the board actually says that's not the right reason, that's not something that can be fixed.
Right. Yeah,
Right,
I get it. Yeah. I'm talking about more minor errors or small.
Yeah, they definitely have adopted the new, ability to overlook some minor errors on specific notices that they're considering what's called substantially compliant, meaning we know who this is. Yes, we forgot to write main floor. They know where they live. The lease says it. That's not happening anymore.
Well, especially if you're dealing with like mom and pop landlords, right? They're not doing this every day. So like, yeah. Sorry, Brent.
Well, a lot of these things fall through the cracks, like addressing. So when you apply to add a unit to a property at the city, there's not one standard way across all of Ontario how you're supposed to label a unit and what you're supposed to call it and what people write on their address. So there's a little bit of chaos going on. But Mark, you mentioned, we've kind of been alluding to it, Bill 60. Do you want to jump into that quickly and pepper Kelly with some questions on what the new changes are? It
just before we do that, I just want to reassure Brent that the quibbling has reduced.
Okay, good. Less quibbling, faster timelines. We're going in the right direction. All thanks to Kelly's input at the board. People. Hey, you mentioned you did thousands of cases. I'm just thinking, if there's only like tens of thousands of cases every year, you must be doing like 10% of them. So
she might be.
I don't know. I'd have to look at the number of cases that was filed in 2025. I didn't look, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Bill 60, I mistakenly called it C60, but we're in Ontario, not federal jurisdiction. But you want to give us the highlights, I guess, Kelly?
Yeah.
That landlords need to know?
There's a lot of good stuff in there for landlords. I was really pleased to see some of the changes. I mean, I still have a wish list, and I've been doing this for long enough to know, it would be super awesome. I know how fast they can change bills. We all know how fast they can change bills, right? Because when that period of time, the dark times happened, they quickly changed a bill to like add all these things and take them away and all this stuff. So we know it can be done quickly. I feel like they did a lot of work to take into consideration some gaps. There's another but there's still some work to be done. But those awesome things that help landlords and all, just so everybody knows, all of these things as of today, like January 9th, 2026. They're not in effect yet. Like they're approved. Everybody that's received royal assent. It's just like the now they just have to roll them out, and they haven't been rolled out. So the forms haven't been changed, and all those kinds of things. But anyways, the first one is with the N4, because we kind of talked about that before. It used to be a 14-day waiting period, and it's going to change to only 7 days. So
that's the non-payment rent form.
Yeah.
If a tenant doesn't pay the rent. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think all of our listeners memorize the forms.
That's pretty good. I'm impressed. It's pretty good. Taking his omega-3s.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good one. The other one is like hand in hand with that. Sometimes when you go to a rent arrears hearing, a tenant's defense to non-payment is that there's a whole bunch of maintenance issues at the property, and they're called Section 82 issues. So currently, if a tenant wants to raise Section 82 issues, all they have to do is fill out this form, and they have to do it 7 days before the hearing and serve it on the landlord. Okay, that means it's giving everybody the heads up that they're looking for some kind of compensation for the landlord allegedly failing to fulfill their maintenance obligations, and they're looking for an offset of the rent they owe versus what the problems are. Now the board is saying, the bill changes it to be, you can't just serve this document 7 days in advance. You actually have to pay 50% of the rent that you owe in order to be able to raise Section 82 issues at a hearing. Huge.
Wow.
Huge. Either to the board or to the landlord. You pay the money. They have to pay 50% of the rent arrears in order to raise those Section 82 issues at a rent arrears hearing.
And like you mentioned earlier, that could be a greater amount now if they've been in arrears for several months. Wow.
Yeah.
Now, just to be clear, they could file something with the LTB before, right? If they're not served with anything, tenants can always say like, "Hey, that there's problems at this rental," and that will be heard. But
that's right. That's a T6. In this case, that would be a T6.
Yeah, but not in the case where they're just trying to get out of paying rent. I mean, I guess the fastest way to find mold in one of your rentals is to serve an N4.
Right? I mean, they forget it's their obligation to report things like that to you too, right? Like, anyways, so that's a huge one. I mean, like that to me was like, whoa, that's big. Because the last minute, they would bring them, or they would say, before the hearing, when you try to have a private conversation with them, well, I'm going to tell the adjudicator that I'm still waiting for the kitchen tap to be fixed. It's been dripping for 2 months. When did you tell the landlord? Telling you right now. It's like, it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? And plus you can't just bring things the day before. Everybody, this is like fair. You have to be able to look at it and prepare a response. So it doesn't work that way. But now to have to pay 50% of the rent that's owed, that is huge in the landlord's favor. Big time.
Yeah.
How does that question? How does that compare to other provinces? Like we always talk about Alberta being more, landlord friendly in terms of LTB. But like, would other provinces already have similar stuff, or?
I don't.
You don't deal.
I
with
mean, I didn't.
Ontario.
I would have studied last night about which provinces, because the next, part 2 of this could be, what do other provinces do? Honestly, Brian, I'm sorry, I don't know. I know they have different shorter timelines on things. Some provinces, the East Coast, there's also involves like bailiffs sooner than ours do and things like that. But I'm not brushed up on it enough to know enough to have like a podcast conversation about it.
Come on, Brent.
Sorry.
You throw
right.
Ontario, go ahead, quiz me.
Okay.
Go for it.
What else is in Bill 60 for us?
Yeah, okay. They're hiring more sheriffs, which is awesome, because for those landlords, not the aspiring ones, but for the ones that have been through the process and got their order and are waiting for sheriffs to schedule evictions. Sometimes in some areas, there's a delay. Like, let's face it, the population of Toronto causes delays on every aspect of the court process, every level of court. Brampton, even some of the more remote areas, because they have to get sheriffs to come from somewhere else to come to do evictions. So they're hiring more sheriffs, which is great. I know for myself, like with dealing with a lot of sheriffs, that they already have been like switching them from different regions to try to add support to get the volume down of the number of evictions that they have to schedule. So that's really good. That's going to help.
Kelly, let me stop you right there. I want to like you to tell us, because when I think sheriff, what I always have thought is like, I think back to my growing up watching cartoons, and the guy's got the the 5-pointed badge, and he's the sheriff of that one horse town, right? But like that's not what a sheriff does in like modern terms. What's the role? Yeah. First of all, do they have a horse? And then second of all, what is the role of a sheriff? Because I think a lot of people don't actually know in Ontario.
In this case, the role of a sheriff is they're more like enforcement officers, and they don't have the pointed stars anymore. They actually have those things that are Velcro, like the police do, like across their chest. So they could share vests with other people. Like today I'm a police officer, tomorrow I'm the sheriff. But they're enforcement officers, right? So they're used in all sorts of different situations. But in this situation, part of their powers are to follow court orders. And a court order says the sheriff can give the landlord vacant possession of this property on this date, so long as the landlord pays this fee and blah, blah, blah. So they actually go to the property. They have a vehicle. It's not a horse. It's a vehicle. It is like a court vehicle. They don't use their own. And there's no spurs on it. And I'm sure the gas is paid by the government. But anyways, and they roll up and they post a notice 7 to 10 days before they're actually going to execute the eviction. And that just gives the tenant the heads up to either pack and get out, or they literally take them out. They literally take them out of the property. If they're still there, if the tenants are still there and all their stuff is there, it triggers the landlord's responsibility to give them 72 hours to remove everything. But after that, done. Everything gets tossed or thrown out. Okay, Brent's got something good to say.
I'm just thinking, like, when it gets to that point, I mean, it's, to me, it's sad. It's just, I think we're dealing with broken people in a broken world. And like, no one wants to see that happen or go through that. So yeah, it's just sad prospect that we have to hire more sheriffs and we have to deal with this. But yeah, I think reality is like rising costs. People can't afford, and they get stuck with their payments, or they lose their job, or hard times, like you said, fall on everybody.
Yeah, and I think like the way you're saying that, Brent, is so true. Like for me, this job, I don't rejoice when it comes to that. Like when I said before, I want to see a file closed, some of them I have to obviously remove the personal component from me doing my job for somebody, but it sucks. Like they've had so many opportunities to try to fix it before then. And I think like by shortening the timelines and hiring more sheriffs, I think it will change. There will be a significant change in the fact that a vast majority of the bad tenants feel like they can ride the system. But if there's a shorter timeline, the hearings are being scheduled faster, evictions are being scheduled faster, they got to smarten up, or it is going to happen to them. You know what I mean? So I think like it is sad, but in order to make things shift so that the balance or the power is more even, they have to do those things in order to make a change. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Okay, sorry, I got us off track with the whole sheriff.
Did you need a tissue? That was sad. It is, and I mean it's so bad. And I'm teasing Brent, but I think he can take it. That's okay. Yeah. These are smart questions, and you're right. It is terrible to get to that point.
Well, with our situation too, when we were evicting the tenant, like there was multiple times where they had options and they just refused or
Yeah.
didn't want to take them. And yeah, it just kind of boggles your mind. But I mean, everybody has their own personality and situation they're dealing with. So it's hard to say, okay, well, like, why didn't you do this sooner? But yeah, I think when it came down to the wire at the end, like, we never had to get the sheriff involved. And then you kind of scratch your head like, okay, well, if you were going to move out all along, like, why did we drag this out for so long? Right. Like, we can't just talk. And, but yeah, not everybody can come to an agreement between just the landlord and the tenant. They need to involve some sort of third party and negotiate these things out. So that's what the landlord tenant board and, like yourself, are there for, to kind of provide that sounding board and help navigate these issues. But
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Mark. You were going to get
No, I
us back
just-
on
No,
No,
track.
that was good. It's
Classic Mark. I don't think we're going to go back on track here.
well, back to the other things for like Bill 60.
Yes, Bill 6. Let's get back to Bill 60.
I don't know if there's anything else we want to pull out of there, or are there any really juicy things, but
Yeah, the
The
N12.
N12s.
That one. Yeah,
Okay.
the N12 for personal use. For the landlord's personal use, this doesn't apply to a purchaser's use, but it does apply to the N12 being used for landlord's personal use of the property or the other family members that qualify to use the property for their personal use. If you give the tenant, currently, if you serve that notice, you are only required to give the tenant 60 days notice. The tenant doesn't have to vacate in the 60 days notice because you still have to take that notice to the board unless the tenant moves. But you also are required to pay them compensation equal to 1 month's rent. Okay. The change with Bill 60 says that, hey, if a landlord needs to take possession of the unit for their own personal use, then they can give the tenant 120 days notice and not have to pay them 1 month's compensation. And the reason why, like, the compensation component was implemented in the first place was to really help tenants who weren't planning on leaving to have first and last month to go somewhere else, because the landlord's holding a last month's rent. So there's 1 month that they're not going to be paying. And if the landlord has to pay them 1 month's compensation, then they should have first and last somewhere else to move somewhere else. That's really why it was implemented in the first place. I think also the difference is that at that time when it was implemented, the rents were a lot lower. When you have a longer term tenancy and you haven't like increased the rent and like the rent's $1,700, but now it's $2,500, there's still that challenge for them to try to get first and last month's rent. But if you're giving them 120 days, it gives them more time to prepare to vacate.
so now we're giving them more time, but we're taking away the compensation.
You don't like you're basically saying, you know, you've got 120 days to prepare yourself. And your last month's rent is already being held by us. But they're removing that requirement for the landlord to pay because it's not working the way they wanted it to work before. So right now, the way it is that the tenants are getting the 1 month's compensation and they're also not leaving. So it's penalizing the landlords, right? So give them more time and you don't have to pay them.
So I have some thoughts about the N12. Like,
Wow.
well, no, I mean, I'm obviously would be more on the landlord side, I guess, since we represent landlords. But this is the one I find is like the most, my personal opinion, is the most abused. And you get shady people being like, "Yep, I gotta move my whoever into this house," and you know they're not doing it. And I've talked to some clients where it's like, no, we're not going to represent you, or we have nothing to do with this because I know it's fraudulent. You're not moving your family in there. You're just trying to get rid of this tenant. So, I find it's way overused. But what are the penalties if you do that as a landlord? If you say, I got to move my son in because they have nowhere to go, and 2 months later you've renovated and it's listed for rent and your son is not living there. Are there recourse for the tenants?
$1 million. No, it's a lot.
It
It's
sounded like the sheriff was
risky.
coming after you for a
The
second there.
sheriff, the ones with the stars and the horses, they're
Yes.
coming.
They're coming for you. All right.
And there's tumbleweeds, and like if you
Yeah.
start hearing the whistling music, you're in trouble. Yeah, exactly. So that's actually a really good question. Like, I have actually turned away clients who are like, I'm desperate, I'm serving this, we're not really going to move in, we're going to leave it empty.
Yeah.
I've said, these are the pitfalls. You should not do this. I'm not here to put you in a position of liability. I'm here to protect you and to assist you. I've turned away people who are trying to do that in bad faith, and they actually say what's going to happen, and they gauge whether or not they care that they're going to have to pay. In the past, $35,000 fine potentially, or pay for the tenant's difference in rent for a year. They're like, I don't care, do it. And I'm like, sorry, I'm not doing it, because a component of that application is whether or not it's in good faith.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the government, or the government who put all of the sections of the act in place, they've tried to reduce the number of people who will file those types of applications by requiring them to swear an affidavit or a declaration that they do require it. So you're going to perjure yourself so that you can like get your tenant out. Like, there's all these things in place to deter landlords from doing that. And some of them were still saying, I don't care, just do it. And I won't. There are lots of other people who will take those on, but not me. But also, after the tenant vacates, they have 1 year to file an application against the landlord for bad faith. And they can ask for tons of stuff. Now the monetary jurisdiction has increased to 50,000 at the board and at small claims court, where it was 35 before. Like, I've been doing this so long, I've seen it. I think when I was first doing this, it was at 10,000, and before that, I think it was at 6,000. But I was just coming up the ranks when it was at the 6,000. But it was 10,000, it was 25,000. It was 35,000, and now it's 50,000.
Now we're gonna have listeners trying to guess your age. So,
be kind.
Born in
All I say
2011.
is, be kind. Be kind.
With inflation, things go fast.
Yeah, these are inflation-adjusted numbers, people.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
That was only the
But
early
no,
2000s.
It is true. Like, I've heard of stories where, like you said, in that year after, the tenant does come back and says, hey, you evicted me under this premise, but that didn't really happen.
Yeah.
And you might think you're fine for 6 months, and then all of a sudden you get a thing in the
No.
mail. It's like, what's going on here?
It's bad. And then, and also to defend people who have done that. Like, maybe I wasn't part of the initial process where they served the notice and got the tenant to move out, but they've come to me to try to help them defend. Man, it's like, what were you thinking? Like, as soon as they left, you rented it? Like, you posted it for rent? Like, you're asking for it. Like, and then you're going to try to get them to believe your defense after you lied? Like, come on, man. Like, think about it. Like, it is a go-to though. And that's why they had to increase the penalties. Like, tenants can ask for $50,000 fine against the landlord. They can ask for up to a year's worth of rent. They can ask for pain and suffering, like special circumstance, money, moving costs. They can ask for they can ask to be placed back in the unit if it hasn't been re-rented. Like, it's no joke, man. Like, and then here's the other thing. That was the other thing they made them swear to is you would not get a successful application for that type of thing unless you had provided not only a declaration that says, I do so swear I need this in good faith. You have to disclose how many other N12 notices you served in the last 2 years. Like, because they're trying to see if this is something you're using like all over the place, right? And it's hard to monitor, but you're swearing all of those things, right? And you're basically so many different times lying.
So why is it such a go-to thing? Like, is it just landlords are so desperate to get tenants out, or like, because are you talking to these people directly and saying, hey, like, do you really need this? Or like,
Yeah.
what's the consequence if they
Like,
don't do
what's
it?
your plan? Like,
Yeah.
so your plan is to what? Leave it empty because all they need to do drive by and see no one's living there. Like that's the other thing. You literally need it for your personal use. And what they're doing is making it more difficult for landlords who actually need the property for their son or daughter going to school, or for their aging parents, or maybe they've got some financial difficulties and they're selling their primary residence. Like, who knows, right? And it makes them have to jump through these hoops and take this long process to try to achieve something that is in good faith. But they just automatically say, they've approached the tenant. Typically, it's about the gap in what the current rent is versus what the market rent is. Typically, that's where they say to the tenant, will you agree to like a higher increase? And the tenant's like, no, there's a provincial guideline for that. And then the landlord's like, fine, then I'm just going to move in and you've got to go. Like, that is what I see.
Right.
It's like, it's a threatening tool.
That's so it's caused by rent control.
Yeah, that's great.
It's caused by poor
That actually
behavior,
should have
Brent.
been another thing. Honestly, that should have been another thing. Because
Yeah.
Brent, you made a good point. Because 2.5%, what does that actually do? Like, come on. But
Yeah.
2.5% over time, like for those landlords who always say to me, I was such a good landlord, I didn't increase their rent. It's not about being a good landlord by not increasing the rent. They don't care. They're just going to pay you what the rent is. If you're not increasing it, you're not enforcing one of your rights. And then if you down the road have to sell your property, you're actually contributing to that gap in what the current market rent is. So I always say it doesn't matter. You're not doing anything nice for them. It's actually making it more difficult for them to re-enter into the rental market too. So do it. Like, it is only 2.5% on any given year. I think this year it's 2.5. But you do need to do it.
Yeah, that's the difference between owning a property and renting, right? So if you own it and you buy it and then you put your head in the sand in terms of the market for 15, 20 years, generally speaking, yeah, like assets inflate in price. So while you're just every month paying your mortgage, maybe you check the value of your house in 20 years and you're like, wow, I actually made money, right? But as a tenant, if you get a lease, and then you just kind of go about your life for 20 years and pay the rent, and sure, it goes up 1-2% a year. And then, at some point that house is needed by the landlord, or is renovated, or is demolished, or whatever happens. And because you don't own it, now you're in for a big reality check, right? Well, the rents have skyrocketed. And if you haven't prepared for that financially, it can be a huge impact, right? It could be like triple or double. I don't know. I have one tenant right now we've had for 10 years. The market rent on their unit is easily double what they're paying. And it's just,
I really wish that there would have been that's on my wish list, right? Like, let's take a look at reality, get on the ground and see what's actually happening. Like, look at the market and look at what over this period of time, like, come on, can we get a little bit more than 2.5?
Well, I think
so I wanted to ask you, sorry, Mark, I want to ask because this year, 2025, we've actually seen kind of falling rents. And while we were allowed to raise rents usually every year, I think a couple years ago, they put it at zero when the whole thing that you mentioned in the dark times, the dark ages, like you were talking about. But like, there's some times where if you follow the law, it's not necessarily the best thing to do either, because like if I raise the rent, like if I'm legally allowed to raise the rent, for example, but I do it in a market where tenants have a lot more options, like they're moving out. So that's one example where I'm just like, okay, if I follow my system of I'm going to raise the rent, and that's the advice you get, right? When you become a new landlord, it's like, well, every year you set it in your system to raise the rent, and that's what you do. And, as soon as the time comes, you send the notice, you get the thing. And it's like, this year we've actually experienced it. Like, we had a significant portion of our units turn over and a lot of them came in with lower rents or
Interesting.
it was a big turnover. And some of the ones that got a rent increase, not everybody did, but some of the ones that did were just like, can we talk about this? And the ones we talked to, okay, we'll actually keep it the same or we'll lower it even because we don't want you guys to move. So I don't know if you've seen that at all or if that's like surprise, but I just kind of came across it myself through experience going like, I don't want to fill any more units that I don't have to.
True that. I mean, that's really interesting. I feel like I don't know if you can tell me what region that was, but was it like Toronto or
Yeah,
something?
Hamilton, St. Catharines
Oh,
area.
Hamilton
Like,
too.
yeah.
Wow.
I
Okay.
mean, when we leased the units in the first place, it was at a very high peak in the market, right? So a lot of
Yeah.
the tenants are like paying premium rents, which, is great at the time. But if
Sure.
you add a rent increase on top of that,
Oh,
it adds
yeah.
up.
Good to know. So I guess the way you would have to look at it then is really like, sorry, this might be like, I'm just going to break it apart because my brain processes things a little bit differently. But you're saying that if you're looking out at the market and like a unit that, for numbers sake, your tenants are paying 2,300, but a comparable unit right now is going for 2,100. Why are you going to serve that notice of rent increase? Because they'll go somewhere else. So yeah, I
Yeah.
guess being aware of what's going on out there is important to consider. But if everything is like status quo or you're still within that good range, then you should be utilizing it. But yeah, interesting, Brent.
Yeah, I don't know. I think our experience was over 50%. So if I had that situation with a 2,300 price and a 2,100 market value, if we issued the rent increase, maybe 50% would say, I'll start shopping. That's like a prompt, right? To say, oh, my rent is going up. I'm going to start let me compare, right? Like if I got that notice, the same thing you mentioned earlier about filing the notice to the tenant when they're like, oh shoot, I got to pay my rent. This is serious, right? They get that rent increase. It's like, oh, well, let me just hop on Facebook and check. Oh, wow, I could get that for way cheaper. Okay, right. So I don't know. It just kind of prompted me to want to ask you, like, what other landlord decisions can create conflict later, even if they're kind of technically legal. And I don't know, having some foresight as a landlord and not being absentee. I don't know.
That's a
Maybe,
really
Well,
good. Yeah,
just
that's
because you can doesn't mean you should, right?
yeah.
In
I
every
mean, I
case.
guess yeah, being aware of what's going on. But when you were saying about them getting an N1 and jumping out, like leaving and vacating, I was thinking, wow, so an N1 could technically like replace an N2.
yeah. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but it usually doesn't work in your favor, right? Because now you got to rent that out for a lower rent. So
Oh wow.
or you should have
Yeah.
just left it alone.
No, but that's interesting. It's really
Well, but
I guess-
what about being strict on lease terms? And we should probably, I don't know, we don't have much time, but like I would love to kind of get into filling out a lease for dummies, and what we can add to a lease and what we can't add to a lease from a high level. But even just being strict on the lease terms, like if you start clamping down on something, I guess a lot of this just applies if it's a down market and it's hard to get tenants, right? Because anything you do as a landlord to enforce your rights and like take advantage of that, you put in jeopardy the tenancy, right? Because they can just leave. But.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that I do teach in the investor classes is that like for the not the advanced one, because the advanced one is more about like the situation that you or other people were in where you're talking about like altering your properties and things like that.
How many times have you used my situation as an example?
Sorry. I haven't said particulars.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, what was I going to say? Now you've got me sweating.
Well, in your investor classes, what do you?
Oh yeah, I'm teaching them like at the beginning to like I used to do this like even when I was in my property management days because like I don't know if you know this and I'm sure Mark does, but I used to do property management for like 10 years, right? When a new tenant was coming on, I had created like a package that I would give them, and it quite clearly set out all of like our expectations. It's not the lease agreement. It's a welcome package basically. And to be honest, the property management that I did wasn't single family homes. It was like multi-unit buildings, 30 units in a building up to like 270 or something like that. Right. But it quite clearly set out the expectations. So the policies as well, meaning if you're late with your rent, the policy is that we will be serving an N4 notice. It sets the stage for what you're going to do. And I think it's important for someone to understand that at the beginning, because they get personally offended. It's like, I texted you and said I had to get a new tire and that's why I'm late. Why did you serve me this N4? Well, from the very beginning, it was quite clear that that was what the policy is, and that's how we're going to be affecting it. And I think it really depends on the type of tenant that you have and really whether or not the reason for them not paying was legit, because when they get defensive, it's typically because there is another reason. Maybe they went out with their friends and they like blew too much at the casino and now they don't have enough to cover the rent. Like, you know what I mean? Someone else, or the mentality of another tenant is like, crap, I'm going to have to tell them I'm late, but I really am going to pay this. You know what I mean? So it doesn't affect the relationship. They're grateful for you, understanding, but that shouldn't, like, you can decide whether or not you serve the notice, but it's those other ones where they constantly use all these excuses. This month, my dog's leg broke and I had to pay the VAT. Like, I mean, I've heard them all. Those are the people where serving the notices or enforcing your rights starts to affect the relationship. It doesn't happen all the time.
So do we have time, Mark, for the lease? I don't know.
We should probably start wrapping up. Kelly's got
that's a
work to
biggie.
do.
A
Maybe that'll be
fun
part
one.
2.
We'll do another one.
Yeah, the way I love to approach that one, and we can talk about that offline. But yeah, I think, Mark, we covered most of the important things that are happening on with the Bill 60. There was just one last thing, and I know we're going to wrap up, was that I think it's really important for everybody to understand that with that portion that talked about streamlining the discretionary power that adjudicators have, which is really means that they're going to be clarifying the sections of the Act and the Ontario regulations that apply to their decision-making processes, so that they don't have such a broad ability to use their own discretion in making their decisions. Because what it does is it creates such inconsistency with findings on similar issues at the board, where you literally will log in and know by experience that this adjudicator is likely not going to see this the way that adjudicator did, or another one. And it's unfair. So that's kind of been, and also with having to ramp up the number of adjudicators, there's all different levels of experience, right? So that also plays a factor in the usage of discretionary power, and they needed to fill those positions. But quite honestly, there's a lot that have been there for a longer time or have had more experience in the field that could maybe interpret things in a different way, in a more in line with what the law meant, where the less experienced ones, or ones that aren't as invested in taking consideration of the fairness, would just say, I'm using my discretionary power. So that's another huge part that's going to be changed. Not over the whole, all sections of the Act, but specific ones, like one that's a big problem, like persistent late payment.
Yeah.
It used to be like, 5 or 6 times, tenancy terminated. You had a chance. You're repeatedly infringing or substantially interfering with a landlord's rights by not paying your rent in full and on time. You're done. Or you have a conditional order that gets you back on track. For 12 months, you have to pay on time. Those notices, basically, with the discretionary power that all the adjudicators had in the different decisions of how they were considering persistent late payment, it was all over the place. And it's like, can we get someone to like make a ruling on this, please? You know what I mean? Because there was nothing that you could rely on. And I think that's the big part for landlords. They can have comfort in knowing that there's going to be some real strict parameters about how they're using their discretionary power. That's big.
Yeah, no, that's
Less
important.
quibbling, more strict parameters. I like that. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, just quickly, I want to wrap up, but do they still do in-person hearings?
You can, in certain circumstances, you can apply to have your hearing in person for accommodation reasons, but they've found ways to not have to do that. So I would say that 99.8% of hearings are virtual. And let's say someone like so for example, someone doesn't have internet, they don't have a phone, they don't have a laptop. How are they going to participate in the proceedings? So legal clinics have been a source for people to go to be able to participate, and also libraries and things like that. So they found a way that they don't have to do in-person hearings. But let's face it, there are like some cases that have so much evidence and so many documents that you literally cannot send them to the parties, and everything has to be done in the old paper things. So in very extreme circumstances, they could make accommodations to have an in-person hearing if necessary, but it is not it's not like the regular or standard.
It's not the one that you want to get the paralegal bill for at the end.
Imagine if I had to go. One of my clients is like living in another country. Well, not one of them. I have several clients that live in other countries, but imagine if they had to pay for me to like go up to like Timmins or North Bay.
Yeah.
No. But you know what? Before they were all on virtual hearings, I had built myself a network of colleagues that would attend in those areas, because I've had clients all over the province for like most of my career as a paralegal. So it was, for me, it was not a big deal, right? It was like, I will, like, Brent, you've got somebody up in Sudbury, no problem. Let's hop on a telephone call. I've given my instructions in front of this person. You're confident that someone I'm recommending is going to listen to my instructions. They're calling me if they get into a jam. My neck's on the line, so it's got to be somebody I know can do the job. And you agree to have the agent attend in my absence, so you don't have to pay like me to go all the way up there. But now I can, I set up several laptops. I can be in Sudbury and Guelph and Brampton all by sitting from my desk. It's awesome.
So
Yeah,
that
it's good
is
for
one
business.
benefit of the times that shall not be named, right? Is that switch to virtual hearings. So
Yeah.
one silver lining. Okay, sorry, Brent, do you have one more burning thing?
I was
He
just
did
going to
look like he
say,
did. He did.
I
look
like, hopefully after this podcast, people are a little bit less afraid of having tenants and what could go wrong. And if not, I guess, where can they get a hold of Kelly?
Nice. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, you can email me at my email address, kelly@khparalegal.com. I do also have a website. My website is khparalegal.com. But also my telephone number that has been the same for probably 15 or 20 years is 905-466-3542. But those ways you can reach me.
That's 905 Sheriff? Or so
I'm gonna look that up and
no,
get it
maybe
right
not.
now.
We'll put that. Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes for people too who want to reach out.
No.
Kelly puts the she in sheriff.
Yeah.
Oh, man. No, you've been excellent help for us and hopefully for our listeners to get some insight into all of this. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you,
Yeah, it's
Kelly.
been
Thank
fun.
you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and to our listeners, thanks for hanging out with us today. Hopefully, it's got you some value. And if you find yourself in a pickle, give Kelly a call.
Steward your wealth wisely. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
If you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To learn more about the show, head on over to twostewards.ca and explore our free resources. To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.
Nailed it.